Alternating bass is a very simple and very versatile way of adding interest at the bottom of your picking or strumming. And in its simplest form, it'll put you in mind of a slow country strumming like you might hear with Johnny Cash, but actually alternating bass finds its place in blues and swing and jazz and rock and folk and classical music and all sorts of other genres too. So let's dive in. What happens is we play the normal bass note. Here I'm going to choose an A minor for a simple example, and my normal bass note would be the open fifth string. That's an A at the bottom of an A minor chord. I'm going to pick and then I'm going to strum the upper strings on the second beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a little bit monotonous. But how about this? If we switch to the open sixth string on the third beat, there, we're now alternating the bass. And in fact, that choice of the open sixth string isn't a random option. What we're doing is moving from the bass note of the chord, the so-called root, which of course is an A for A minor, and then we're moving to the fifth. So if A is 1, A, B, C, D, E is the fifth. With A it's easy because A is the first letter of the alphabet, but this is always what we do. We just count up the musical alphabet. A, B, C, D, E. So I want to alternate from A to the lowest version of the fifth, which happens to be the open sixth string, the lowest note of the guitar. So that's how I'll alternate the bass for A minor. Let's look at another example and you might start to see a pattern. Here's D7. Now this could be D minor or D7 or D or any other kind of D chord with the normal bass note is on the open fourth string. That's D. Now I want to go from D, which is the root of the chord, D, E, F, G, A, to A is the fifth. So I'm going to go from the open fourth string, which is D, and we already know there's an A, that's the fifth of this chord, on the open fifth string. So D, open fourth, down to A on the open fifth. And as I say, that would work for a D minor, for instance, too, or any kind of D chord you have. Okay. Now, in both cases, we moved from the normal bass note to the next string down, by which I mean a lower sounding string. Let's look at another example here. This time with a chord where the bass note is fretted. On the previous examples, we had open strings for the bass note. But let's look at C now. There's a C. My normal bass note was on the third fret of the fifth string, and I want to go to the fifth of the chord. C, D, E, F, G. Now there's a G on the open third string, but there's a lower one on the third fret of the sixth string. So that's the one I'm going to go for, alternated between the third fret of the fifth string to the third fret of the sixth string. And in this case, it's going to be necessary to move my third finger down as I alternate. Sometimes you'll see people playing like this, where the alternating bass is so ingrained in the sound of the music that you actually kind of want to pre-form a shape that allows you to alternate the bass. Usually though, you'll just move that finger down. So again, in this case, I've taken the normal bass note and I've moved to the next string down. In fact, it's the next string down on the same fret. This is an important point. Third fret on the fifth to third fret on the sixth. We actually had that with the previous chords. It was the open fifth string and then the open sixth string. So again, that's kind of the same fret, fret 0 if you like, or for the D7 again, open fourth to open fifth. And any time we do this, and this works for any major or minor chord, we're going to move from the normal bass note to the next string down on the same fret. Let's see if we can find another example here with B7. Now, the normal bass note for B7 is the second fret of the fifth string. So, second fret of the sixth string. That's the standard alternating bass for B7. As I move that finger down to the sixth string, you might wonder, whether the open fifth string as it now is going to interfere with the rest of the chord. Well, two things to say. First is that as I move that second finger down onto the sixth string, I'm actually going to just kind of mute that fifth string. I'm going to just touch that string so it doesn't really sound. And also the strumming that I play above it is primarily on the top strings, so we don't really hear that chord. Same with the C. We don't really hear the open fifth string once I've moved my finger off. And if we did, I'd be muting it with the fleshy underside of my finger. So that's really alternating bass. I'm taking the normal bass note and moving it down to the next string on the same fret. Now, the exception to this, or at least the extension of this rule, is when we're dealing with chords where the bass note is already on the sixth string. And in case you're thinking, well, then there's a whole new raft of rules to learn, well, there are really only two chords where that happens. Let's look at those. Here, for instance, is an E chord. Now, this is good for E, or E minor, or E7, or any kind of E chord. I'm already playing the bottom string, the open bottom string, as the normal bass note for this chord. And I can't move down. I haven't got a seventh string on this guitar. My open sixth string is as low as I can go. I need to work out what the fifth is. So for E, it's E, F, G, A, B. Okay, so B is the fifth. That's the one I want to alternate to. And there is a B, as we already know because we looked at B7, right here on the second fret of the fifth string. And actually, if you think about it, I'm already fingering that. E in the bass and then B in the bass. I don't need to move anything in the left hand. I'm just going to play 6 to 5. So for any E chord, this is E minor, but it could be, let's say, E7, 6 to 5. That would be the standard alternating bass for an E chord. And the only other chord that you might play really with a bass note on the sixth string, a simple chord that is something like a G or a G7. Let's look at G7. That's an easy enough chord. Now, normally I've got my G here on the third fret of the sixth string, and I can't go down to the next string because I haven't got one. But what's the fifth? G, G, A, B, C, D. And we already know there's a D on the open fourth string. So I'm going to go 6 to 4, 6 to 4. Okay, so that's the rule for a G chord. For E, it was 6 to 5. That's E minor. And any kind of G chord, it's 6 to 4. And you might think, all right, well, what about F? Let's say that's a six string chord. Well, it is, but that's based around an E shape, isn't it? So for an F chord or any bar chord based on E, I'm going to do exactly what I would do for a standard E chord. I'm going to go 6 to 5. Here it is. And if I had a bar chord based on some sort of A shape, let's say this is C minor. It's an A minor shape barred on the third fret. Now the rule for A minor was 5 to 6. So for a bar chord like this, C minor, which is A minor barred on the third fret, again it's 5 to 6. And if you're thinking of incorporating alternating bass in your bar chords, then even if it's a 5-string chord, it does make sense to bar all the way across, because I need my bar to go to the 6th string so that I can play 3rd fret on the 5th to 3rd fret on the 6th. So there you are. That's the whole of alternating bass. For any standard major or minor chord, you're going to go from the normal bass note to the next string down on the same fret. When you can't do that, it's because you've got a chord where the bass note is already on the 6th string. That's going to be either a G, in which case 6 to 4, or an E, in which case 6 to 5. And that's alternating bass.